Hi, my name's Billy and I'm a teaching artist with LACMA. In today's project, we're going to explore how an artist can create a portrait using proportion and details such as objects, clothing and facial expression. So the materials that you're going to need for this project are right in front of me here. You're going to need some white paper, just some regular white paper. You'll need a pencil. Any drawing pencil would be good. You'll need an eraser, and you'll also need a ruler, so make sure you have a ruler where you can see all the measurements on the side. What we're going to do is look at a portrait by an artist called Jose Lozano. He made a picture of a person who inspired him, and then we're going to create our own portrait using proportion. Before we do that, let's answer two questions. First of all, what is a portrait? And what is proportion? Have you ever made a portrait before? And if so, what details did you include? Think back. A portrait is a picture of a person. You could create a portrait of yourself, and that would be called a self-portrait, or you could create a portrait of someone else. Artists often include other details, such as clothing and objects, as a way to give us clues about the identity of the person in their picture. Artists might also include other details, such as facial expression and pose, to tell us more about how the person is feeling. So now, what about proportion? What is proportion? Do you know? Proportion is the relationship between the dimensions or sizes of different elements in an artwork. So for example, if you're drawing a picture of a person, we know that our legs are roughly half the height of our entire body. So as we look at the artwork by Jose Lozano, I'm going to ask you some questions. And as we go along, you could pause the video and write down the answers to those questions. Or if you like, you can just answer in your head as we look at the image together. What do you notice about this portrait? Does the style of the portrait remind you of anything? Do you know who this person is? And how might you tell? What details has Jose Lozano included that might tell you who it is? This is a portrait of Frida Kahlo, a well-known Mexican artist who famously had a monobrow, which you can see in this image. Jose Lozano is a first-generation Mexican artist who was born in California, but also lived in Mexico when he was younger. Lozano makes artworks about his culture and the culture of his community in California. Frida Kahlo had a huge influence on American art and has also influenced Lozano himself. The title of this work is Recortando a Frida. Recortando means cutting in Spanish. He called it this because he has chosen to represent Kahlo as a paper doll cutout, which is why there isn't any detail in the background and it's plain. You can imagine that you could cut out the dress and place it over the figure to change her clothes. Lozano used to make paper dolls for his nieces, and he later decided to incorporate this idea into his art. Jose Lozano surrounded Frida Kahlo's portrait with objects and details that were significant to her daily life. Lozano said that creating portraits in this way is a bit like telling a short story. He said you can be in charge of designing and placing elements of people's lives. I'm going to read you a story about Frida Kahlo's life, and I want you to look at the image and see if you can find all of the details that Lozano included. Frida Kahlo was a painter, and she used certain tools to make her work, such as paintbrushes and a paint palette. She made many artworks, including a portrait of her husband, the artist Diego Rivera. She also made lots of self-portraits that included details and symbols that told stories about her life. such as the picture she painted of herself wearing a traditional Mexican dress. In 1937, she made a portrait called Me and My Doll, in which she sits on her bed next to a small doll facing the viewer. Carlo had a pet spider monkey called Fulang Chang and several pet parrots, which she also included in her paintings. When she was 18 years old, Carlo had an accident involving a crash with a bus. When she was healing, she had a mirror fastened to her bed so that she could look at her reflection and create self-portraits while in a reclining position. This accident was an important event in her life and was often represented in her paintings, possibly in the symbol of a butterfly. Butterflies start their lives as caterpillars and go through a process of transformation. This could be seen as similar to the changes that Carlo went through when she recovered from her accident. Did you find all the details? Wow, there were so many. So now let's create our own portrait paper doll cutout. To do this, I'm going to show you an example where I create a portrait of myself, but that's mainly just so that I can show you how I represent different features. Lozano created a portrait of someone who was significant to him in his life, so I want you to do the same thing. You should choose someone who's important to you in your life and culture. Now, Lozano said that he used to read and write lots of different stories because he said that you can learn about people from literature. So perhaps think about choosing someone that you've read about in school or at home. You could also choose someone who's close to you. Whoever you choose, it should be someone that you know a lot about so that you can include lots of interesting details in your portrait, such as the types of clothes that they wear, objects, and accessories. But before we do that, let's learn a little bit more about how we can draw the body using proportions. Everyone has different heights and shapes, but there are some general measurements that can help us to draw the human body in roughly the correct proportions. It is said that the height of your head multiplied by 8 is also the height of your entire body. See how this head fits into this body that I've drawn 8 times. This means that we can use the head as a measurement for the different sections of the body. If your figure is standing straight up with their hands by their sides, the head, neck, torso, and arms are in the top 4 sections of the body. The hands, legs, and feet are in the bottom 4 sections of the body. Sometimes artists like to change and experiment with proportions like I did here. But it's good to first learn the correct proportions so that you can experiment and change proportions later. Did you notice how I drew those figures in proportion using only circles and ovals? I like to use simple shapes to represent each part of the body using a very light pencil line. Then I can go back and add details of my portrait on top and erase the lines I don't need. I used an oval for the head, a circle for the neck, a large oval for the torso, and then separate ovals for my upper arm, my forearm, and a smaller oval for my hands. That's just the way I find it easiest to draw a portrait. And I'm going to show you how to do a portrait this way, step by step. So now you might want to pause the video, get your materials together and follow along with me as we go. Or you can just rewind the video later and watch this section again if you need help. by drawing an 8-inch line vertically somewhere on your paper. The top of your line will be the top of your figure's head. The bottom of your line will be their feet. So think about that when you're choosing where to place your line. I'm going to place my line somewhere over here, not too close to the edge of the paper, but somewhere just over here to one side so that I have plenty of space to put other objects in my picture. But you could choose a different place. So I'm going to draw my line straight down, and I'm going to press quite lightly because we will erase this line later on. Once you've drawn your line, divide it into 8 equal parts. I'm going to use my pencil to make a mark where each of the inch lines are. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. There we go. Now we have our line. Now we're going to start to draw the different parts of our figure using circles and ovals. So to start with, I'm going to do a circle in the top one section of my line. This is going to be the head of my figure. Remember, we're just using circles and ovals now so that we can go back and add details later. Next, what you're going to do is draw your neck, a large oval for the body, and also your arms and forearms in the next 3 sections of your line. Once you've drawn your head, neck, torso, upper arms and forearms in the top 4 sections of your line, you're going to draw your legs, feet, and the hands in the bottom 4 sections of your line down here. Now that you have your figure in the correct proportions, you can go over your lines and add details such as clothing, hair, and a facial expression to tell us who your person is and how they feel. You can also add texture to your drawing. For example, if the person in your picture has straight hair, add straight lines. And if your person has wavy or curly hair, add swirly, curly, and wavy lines to their hair. As you add your details and add lines on top of your circles and ovals, you can erase the lines underneath that you don't need anymore. Next, surround the figure with objects and accessories that tell us more about them. If you have time, you can even draw them a change of clothes, like Jose Lozano did. Since I'm creating a portrait of myself, I've added things that I use or have in my home. You can see here that I've added a plant. I've also added my laptop, which I use to read and research lots of artworks. I added the painting that I have behind me in some of my videos. I also have an apron. I've given myself a change of clothes because I often get my clothes covered in paint, so I wear an apron. I also have a pet cat. And since I'm English, I like lots of tea. So I've done a little cup of tea, hot and steaming, sitting on a small table. To finish off my portrait, I added some colour, just using some colouring pencils and some different coloured markers. I combined them both to get some different effects you can see here. And finally, if you would like to do one extra step, you can follow along with me. I've decided that I want to exaggerate that this is a cut-out paper doll. So what I'm going to do is cut out the different parts of my portrait and assemble them and glue them down onto a new sheet of paper. It means that I can move things around and organize the objects and my portrait the way I want them to look. If you do want to do this step, it's completely optional, but if you do, you can get some other paper, so it can be white if that's all you have at home. I'm going to use some coloured paper because I have some coloured construction paper. You'll also need a pair of scissors and some glue, and that's it. When you cut out each of your objects and your portrait, make sure that you leave white space all the way around so that you don't cut off any of the details of your drawing. Once you've cut out your objects, experiment by moving your different objects and your portrait around. Try out different combinations, and when you're happy, glue them down. Now it's time to press pause and start your portrait, or finish off your portrait if you worked alongside with me step by step. When you're finished, press play and we'll come back together and reflect on your work. Look back at your portrait, and if you can share your work with someone, that would be great. But if you can't share your work right now, don't worry. Just write down the answers to some of these questions and ideas and share it with someone later. First of all, sit down and describe the person in your portrait. Tell their story as you look back at your work and all the details you included about them. Why did you choose to make a portrait of this person? What are the important qualities of this person that inspired you to make your artwork? Now let's look back at Jose Lozano's portrait of Frida Kahlo. How do you think Lozano feels about Frida Kahlo and her work? Why do you think Jose Lozano chose Frida Kahlo to create a portrait of in this way? Thank you so much for making art with me today. Remember, this lesson doesn't end here. You can create all kinds of different portraits and experiment with proportion, shape, and color to create portraits and tell stories of lots of different people. And there are lots of other lessons in this course, and we can't wait to see what you're going to create next. Stay creative, keep experimenting, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye for now.